over this country, you got a lot of bright, decent, good people. They're saying, you know what? The situation is hopeless. You can't beat the Koch brothers. You can't beat the billionaires. You can't win. I'm giving up. That is exactly what they want us to believe. And I beg of you, do not enter that world of despair. We can win this fight if we stand together. You can't beat the Koch brothers. You can't beat the billionaires. You can't win. I'm giving up. That is exactly what they want us to believe. And I beg of you, do not enter that world of despair.
We've got a great country, still so young, yearning to be free. And few show the burning kind of bravery to step up and lead with honesty. And we live in a society where money means more than equality. Wealth has trumped our integrity, and families sell out for their dynasties. Well, someone send a prayer straight to Washington and get up out of your chair to do something. Feel the burn, feel the burn. 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 And we live in a great country, a melting pot of diversity. But all throughout our history, it's been at someone's expense for our liberty. Well, it's time for a change, gotta rearrange. The system in place is not working. Flawed education, media manipulation, none of this is really serving. Oh, someone send a prayer straight to Washington to get up out of your chair to do something. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Feel the burn, feel the burn away that which won't serve. Honest voices must be heard. Be for truth, your vote is worth all our freedom bells. And burn away the ignorance that compromises governments. For the people sovereign, ring those freedom bells. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Do something. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Do something. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Do something. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Now we've got an opportunity to be an example the world needs to see. What if our political parties sought to invest in harmony? Well, we've got a dream that all beings know peace, 'cause we all deserve it. Leadership, community, shared responsibility. This way the world is turning, and someone is singing prayers in the heart of Washington. We've getting up out of our chairs to do something. Oh, someone is singing a prayer in the heart of Washington. And we're getting up out of our chairs to do something. Do something. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Feel the burn, feel the burn. Do something. Feel the burn, feel the burn. 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 Ring those freedom, ring those freedom, ring those freedom bells.
All right. Hello and welcome. We are live. This is the new show, Project Sanity. I'm one half of your hosting duo. My name is Richard, aka Progressive Green. With me, we have Nis, and let me just. We have a great show, and I'll just bring Nis up here so you can wave to the folks. We are trying some new software / broadcasting strategy, so you may see some growing pains throughout the broadcast today, but we want to make sure that we're able to bring you the best content we can, and we feel that using these tools, once we are more familiar with them, will allow us to provide you the best content we can. And so on that note, I just want to give you a quick little idea of what we're going to be doing today. Like I said, we're still under construction. Today we're going to have a guest, Khary Penebaker, who is running to represent Wisconsin's 5th Congressional District. and we'll have more about that later when Nis interviews him. And we'll also be talking about some recent headlines. And in addition to that, we're going to cover a little bit more about Cinco de Mayo than you might be hearing on other news outlets. And we're going to talk a bit about my personal experience at the Washington State County Convention and as a delegate and what that was like. And I have some video that I took that I'm going to share with all of us so that we can take a look at what democracy looks like inside an actual event of democracy, I should say, or whatever, however you want to call it. And we're going to keep digging and dive deep into what it's going to take to keep the movement going, whether that means within that framework I described at the convention, or whether we are talking about going into other options, changing parties, creating new parties, things like that. Before we get into all of that, one of the first things I wanted to do is I want to give Nis an opportunity to say hello and cover anything I might have missed, and then he'll go into some of our headlines. And so we'll just get him up here for you guys, and there you go.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to all of you for tuning in for our precarious relaunch. I'm formerly of the Scandinavian Perspective, formerly of BTV, and now here with Richard doing Project Sanity, where we try to put some proper discourse into a conversation that is increasingly becoming a shouting match. And one of the ways we want to do that is both by trying to cover news, but also to cover the more grassroots aspects of the news, citizen journalism, bring you interviews with people that you would otherwise not hear about, and as we're going to hear about later in the Cinco de Mayo segment, get some information that otherwise you won't really have access to. And all delivered in not a non-partisan way, but delivered in a way that does not call you our enemy or call out a war simply because we don't agree with you. So let's start out by the news. Speaking of Cinco de Mayo, Hillary Clinton visited LA today, which attracted a very large group of Latino protesters outside of one of her fundraisers. The group said that she, as of her foreign policy experience, included war, strife, and quite a bit of blood on her hands, and that they in no way could endorse her or support her. This is a far cry from the beginning of Hillary Clinton's campaign, in which she kept saying that she won the Latino vote, and recently she is talking about having hot sauce in her purse like other grandmothers. But it's not something that you will hear about in most mainstream media. We had to dig quite a bit to find it in LA Weekly, but she is not received well in LA, where she, until about a month ago, has been consistently ahead of Bernie Sanders, not in LA, California, but where Bernie Sanders has now overtaken her, and hopefully will build up some margins that he will be able to use at the convention. In other related news about Hillary Clinton, not in the FBI investigation concerning her email server, but in the civil suit against the Department of Justice, in which they are suing under the Freedom of Information to find out if the State Department did a proper and lawful search when they were asked to search for Huma Abedin, if she had had improper contact with information based on some alleged findings that some of her family members in the Middle East have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. It's most definitely a witch hunt, but the judge, one of the judges in the case, who is also a Clinton appointee from the 90s, says that it may be necessary to actively depose Hillary Clinton in this civil suit email case. My bet is she's gonna spin it like she's spun the congressional hearings and the Benghazi hearings as another witch hunt, but the optics of a presidential candidate actually being in a courtroom under oath, I don't know how that's going to play, or if people are just going to file it under yet another witch hunt. And today, CNN brought us a story about Clinton in which so-called U.S. officials have stated that, let me see here, to quote the CNN report, some of Hillary Clinton's closest aides, including her longtime advisor Huma Abedin, have provided interviews to federal investigators as the FBI probe into the security of her private email server nears completion. U.S. officials briefed on the investigations tell CNN the investigation is still ongoing, but so far investigators haven't found evidence to prove that Clinton willfully violated the law, the U.S. official says. Now, this does not mean that the case is over, as you can hear the wording that she willfully violated the law. They can still find other grounds, grounds of incompetence, ground of negligence, other things, but there will not. They have so far not found anything as it pertains to her actively pursuing and breaking the law on purpose. Some in the Twitter sphere are now calling the email scandal a dead horse, and that everyone should stop beating it, and that Bernie Sanders' last hope has gone up in smoke. I don't know about all that, but calling it over before the FBI concludes it would be a far cry. This seems more of a, to me, this smells of a rallying cry around her to try and buffer. But we'll see when the DOJ and the FBI come with their final conclusion, which should be within a couple of months. Again, according to the same sources.
Yeah, I think with what you laid out there, I think the overall theme is that's a lot of investigations and a lot of the FBI and a lot of words being thrown around that just generally would not be preferable when picking a candidate to be your nominee. And it seems as though that's been somewhat, like you mentioned, just kind of cast aside, brushed away. It's not a big deal, and called a witch hunt. And I think to varying degrees there is some truth to each of those perspectives, in that it would not be unheard of or shocking for her to have basically done something she shouldn't have and to not end up being held accountable. That's reasonably standard in our political system, I think. So although with this particular thing, the politicians and the alphabet agencies like the CIA and the FBI, they have an often contentious relationship, and so in that particular way, it's also not uncommon, or it's somewhat uncommon. It's usually seen as a big deal whenever things get this serious, like as in the case of General Petraeus and his securing of data. And I've talked to many military men that have said that even just the things that she's already admitted to would get most people kicked out, possibly imprisoned, lots of consequences.
There are people who actually did a private server who have received sentences for it within the State Department. But, I mean, there are rules, and then there are, rules when it comes to the ruling class. Another thing to be said about this is whether or not you believe impropriety has gone on or not. Even in the most corrupt days of the Tammany Hall situations in New York, the Tammany Hall rules of the glad-handing, backhanding, and where you would buy a toilet seat for $5,000 in the 1920s for a school to siphon off money. Even in those days, if someone was publicly under federal investigation or state investigation, they would all distance themselves. They would all say, okay, you have to drop out. We have to find someone else. Sorry, we can't have this. It's too much. But not today. So if that says more about Tammany Hall or about the current situation of politics in the United States, I don't know. Speaking of the states of the politics, as most people are aware of by now, both Ted Cruz and John Kasich has dropped out of the Republican race, and Donald Trump is now the presumptive nominee. Unless there is a great upheaval at their convention, he will be their nominee. To this effect, the Washington Post did a very thorough and deep article on John Kasich, where it smacks a bit of nostalgia of, oh yeah, John Kasich, yeah, we remember this guy. He is actually a centered person, and over objections from his party, he expanded Medicare and Medicaid and benefits for the poor and the homeless in Ohio. And like he was actually, he would normally be a favorite for the Republican nominee. And I can't say anything to this other than, well, you kind of, both the GOP but also the media has kind of made this bet by refusing to delve into any sort of nuance. And now we are in a situation where the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party is Donald Trump, who, when one of his political advisors started airing out a shortlist for VP, got a slew of responses from some of the biggest stars in the Republican Party, where they, most of the big ones said that, for example, there is the Florida Governor Rick Scott was mentioned as a potential candidate, said that he was going to finish his job and he got 2 years and 8 months to go, so he was not interested. And the same goes for, excuse me, I have a bit of frog in my throat apparently. The same goes for several Latino women in high places in New Mexico, for example, and they all turned him down. Now, have you ever heard of a presidential nominee having a problem filling his VP slot?
Yeah, that is pretty unusual. And the irony is, I think this is still, in my opinion, this is still some denial from the Republican Party, in that they are, first off, they're just absolutely too late. The chance to stop Donald Trump from doing what he's doing now was when he was going around with the birther nonsense and all that. When they had the opportunity there to make him look like the clown he was about that, but instead what they did was, around the whole birth certificate issue and everything, they, oh, you know, I'm not going to tell people what to think, or I take Obama at his word, or all those types of statements. And as a result, they allowed Trump to gain legitimacy. And so to turn around and act now as if, oh, you know, we didn't know, or we thought he was a decent guy when we were calling him a decent guy, in like Ted Cruz's case, or, you know, my friend Donald, or when they were all being friendly, when they were worried about what he was going to do or losing his supporters. Now, for them to turn around now and act as though that they're taking the moral high ground by not supporting him still after he's the nominee, it's not so much taking the moral high ground, but as just being stubborn about admitting that he has won the popular vote despite the establishment's best efforts to stop him. He is popular in the Republican Party. And maybe they could have slowed him down / stopped him if they took a different approach at the beginning, but they didn't, and so he is representative of a significant portion of the Republican Party, whether they like it or not. And he's going to be, regardless of whether he wins or loses in November.
Yeah, and like when you have South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, South Carolina here, we're talking about, saying that my plate is full. I have great respect for the will of the people, and as I have always said, I'll support the Republican nominee for president. While I'm flattered to be mentioned and proud of what that says about the great things going on in South Carolina, my plate is full, and I'm not interested in serving as vice president. And she doesn't even mention Trump's name in that statement. New Mexico's governor Martinez had a spokesman reply. The governor has said repeatedly over the years that she isn't interested in serving as vice president. She appreciates that such attention puts New Mexico's in the spotlight, but she's fully committed to serving the people of our state. I mean, the governor of Ohio turns you down. The governor of New Mexico turns you down. I mean, you're fast going to run out of candidates. Ben Carson even turned him down, claiming that he felt like he would only be a distraction in the race.
Well, and I mean, VPs are traditionally attack dogs, and I don't think that Ben Carson really fills that role well anyway. I believe, last I saw a report was that he was on the committee to pick Trump's vice president, though.
Yeah.
So he could always pull a Cheney. Or Cheney. So that is a possibility. I think after a month of Trump beating on Hillary's campaign and Bernie winning in upcoming states like West Virginia and so on, I think that Oregon, and if he has a big win in California, combine that with Trump beating on her campaign, and I think what you're going to end up seeing is that a lot of Republicans are going to start to see that Trump might actually have a chance to pull this out, and they don't want to miss hopping on that Trump train and get run over by the populist movement that sweeps the establishment out of power, potentially. And so maybe Trump goes sour, and I mean, it seems as though Trump's balancing, though, between having saying that he's using the same thing of, saying some things about Hillary, like crooked Hillary and so on and so forth, but then saying, I'm going to be a counterpuncher this general election. So basically, I'm not going to swing at her until she swings at me. I don't think he's actually done that, but he's done a good job of not doing that, but maintaining that perception among the population. So if that's how it's perceived for Hillary, that could trap her in a very tough political position.
Yeah, it could. In other Trump news, just to round it up, we have Speaker Paul Ryan saying earlier today that he cannot yet publicly support or endorse the Donald Trump presidential campaign. He quotes, "I'm just not ready to do that at this point. I'm not there right now." He was then asked. Ryan later said that he hoped to eventually back Trump to be part of the unifying progress, but the first move must come from Trump. And when he was then asked if it was Trump's proposed Muslim ban, or his opposition to free trade, or his call to deport 12 million undocumented immigrants, if that was why he was having problem with supporting Trump, Ryan very courageously replied, "We got work to do."
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
That might take understatement. I mean, this has been a crazy election, so it's probably not understatement. It's got to be in the top 25 at least.
Yeah. But okay, so let's quickly move on from this. I have some more stories on civil rights, but we'll pick them up on the other side of the interview with Khary Penebaker. I just wanted to do a quick update on New York, and then we have, I believe, Richard, you have some updates on voting deadlines and registration deadlines.
Yeah, we can sneak those in real quick.
Yeah, but right now I want to finish up by saying that in the Young Turks reports, his name is Jordan Charison, I believe, reports that there will be the case against the Board of Elections is progressing, and that the Board of Election is retroactively going back and looking at the entire voting and party registration history of anyone in New York City who voted through affidavit ballot to decide whether their vote should be counted. So that the story of New York and what the final tally of New York is going to be is not done. So that was just a last update on that situation. But let's not focus so much about past elections. Let's hear you talk to us about when the next elections are.
All right, let's get us queued up here and pull it up. And so what we have coming up for registration deadlines, we have Montana is on the 9th, so about 4 days from now. DC has one deadline on the 16th. If you're in DC or know people in DC, just tell them that it's the 16th. There's some people that may have an opportunity to register a few days later, but better to get it done. Next, I would say we have South Dakota is on the 23rd of May, and New Mexico is on the 10th. New Jersey is on the 17th, and California is on the 23rd. So those are all May deadlines. So if you or somebody you know is in the Montana, DC, South Dakota, New Mexico, New Jersey, or California area, they need to get registered as soon as possible. The earliest cutoff is, again, Montana on the 9th of this month. As far as voting, we have Guam in 2 days on Tuesday, in 2 days, not on Tuesday. And then we have West Virginia on the 10th, on Tuesday, I believe. And then we have Kentucky and Oregon on the 17th voting. And for Oregon, people should know that it's all vote by mail in Oregon. And so people will have already mailed in their ballots. I believe that's actually the mail-in date, not when they'll have the count, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check on that for the details. And then we have the Virgin Islands on the 4th. Other than that, like you said, we will get back to some of those news stories that we didn't mention, but we wanted to go ahead and get prepped for Khary, which I think he is ready. And Nis, are we ready on our side? Or do we have any other things we wanted to squeeze in before that?
No, let's introduce. So with us today, as you bring us both up, we have Khary Panabaker from Wisconsin's 5th District. He is running a very tough race in a district which was the only district that was carried by John McCain in '08 and was carried by Bush before him. So, Mr. Khary Penebaker, welcome to the Virgin Sailing of the Project Sanity show, and thank you so much for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell our audience a bit about you, how you got into politics, and what you want to do with your candidacy?
Sure. So I had spent the last 3 years roughly, advocating for common sense gun reform with Moms Demand Action and Everytown for Gun Safety in America. And I had, in that capacity, had met hundreds of gun violence survivors. I mean, hundreds. And it got to the point where I'm talking to folks, asking them to march with me, whether it's here in Wisconsin or South Side of Chicago. Whether hey, call your senator, call your state senator, call your federal senator, call your Congress people. Keep at it, and asking people to be engaged and to do things. And it got to the point where I started to ask myself, how much more am I willing to ask of myself? I mean, I'm asking folks to do these things. How much more can I do? And you get to a point where you realize that you're in some ways begging a politician to do something. Mm-hmm. And after a while, it becomes pretty clear that they'll say things to you in private, and then in public they'll vote or say things completely opposite of what they just told you. Yeah. So I determined that in order for me to make the kind of change that I believe in, I wanted to become a part of the solution myself and actually become an elected official, so that I can be a part of the process of making. Bringing about common sense gun reform. So that was the impetus for me wanting to do it. I'm a father of 3. I've lived in Wisconsin the majority of my life. I got a daughter that's 17, a son that's 8, and a little one that is 3, who's got a personality that is quite amazing. But I've been politically active for the most part for a number of years now. And I'm pretty fed up with the way things have been going, and I just want to make a difference. And I believe that the positions that I stand for are such that people will come on board and help make this come about.
So what is your experience? When you walk around talking about gun legislation, what is your experience? We keep hearing about there being 75% of America is for common sense gun legislation, but the politicians, the NRA, they just keep not wanting to enact anything. Is that your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. So right now, over 90% of America supports universal background checks. More than 80% of Republicans support universal background checks. and more than 70% of gun owners support background checks. So what that tells you is you have a broad swath of people in a bipartisan fashion who support common sense gun legislation. The problem is that you have a Congress who isn't willing to do so or doesn't have the spine to do so because they're afraid of the gun lobby. So when the gun lobby is able to spend obscene amounts of money and make these Congress people afraid of what they're going to do, make them afraid of some primary or something like that, they'll find any way to get out of doing something that the public is demanding that gets done. If you look at 2013, we had a good chance of the Manchin-Toomey bill, but even in that case, it wasn't, the bill by far was not perfect, but it was a good step in the right direction, but was unable to reach the number of votes that it needed to pass. And that's a function of a spineless Congress.
Okay, so what is, in your mind, what is the solution to gun control? You have the Second Amendment, you have freedom of expression, you have the free market. What is the solution that allows these things to exist alongside people being safe?
Sure. So I want to make sure that we're clear, though. There is not one solution. It's going to take a multitude of things that come together to reduce gun violence. I don't believe we're ever going to eliminate gun violence and take that 91 gun deaths per day to zero. I don't think that is a feasible thing. It's a goal to work towards, absolutely, but it's not something that's going to be. I don't think that's ever going to be achievable. Just like no other law is going to be that kind of perfect. But at the same time, the first thing we need to do is enact universal background checks. That's the most comprehensive way of reducing gun violence. There's some other things that we can do to start looking at the segments of gun violence. For example, enacting waiting periods before you buy a gun, because that will help with crimes of passion and with suicide. So in my case, my mother committed suicide with a gun. Mm-hmm. If you place a barrier between a person who may be in the fit of rage from a crime of passion, or maybe mentally unstable, because the majority of suicides are impulsive. If you can place a barrier in between those instances, you can help save some folks' lives. So those are just two of the ways that you can help make a real and substantive impact on reducing gun violence.
Okay, so let me just play devil's advocate here. So Fox News would immediately say, well, people can also murder other people with an axe or with a knife, and you can take many pills, and there are other ways to do these things. So why do we not have axe control? So
I mean,
let just an even response. Like,
the fact that you laugh as you say that just shows how ridiculous that argument actually is. But when you look at the states that have universal background checks, you have 48% fewer gun suicides, you have 46% fewer women that are shot and killed by a former or current intimate partner, and you have 48% fewer police officers that are shot and killed. Those are real, tangible numbers that show this kind of legislation can actually work. When folks bring up arguments about, well, what about rope, what about pills, what about axes and all that, well, all they're trying to do is deflect away from the argument so we don't have to talk about it. Okay. They have no interest in actually wanting to solve the problem, because I think some people are of the mindset that we need to have guns for everybody all the time, no matter what. And I mean, I don't think any reasonable person, including the majority of gun owners, actually believe that.
No. That has been the experience I have had as I've traveled along the Bernie Sanders campaign, is finding more and more gun owners who keep saying, I don't care. Let's have some. Right. He's not coming for my guns. Obama is not coming for my guns. Bernie is not. Can we please just agree not to have it be the OK Corral in the streets of America?
Sorry, I didn't plan on hopping in here.
They have a lot more.
Khary, if I could just real quickly. I happen to actually be a gun owner, so I felt obliged to opine on this particular part. And that I think you guys are totally right in that I may be a more liberal of my shooting friends when I go out or whatever. I shoot for hobby and a bit of sport, and so mostly just clay though. So it's registration or not so much. I mean, there's some some craziness around registration, but particularly around making sure that people, some times and background checks, universal background checks, that we all agree on. Even the most far right leaning of my friends that in that crowd, we all agree on that. So it is astonishing to me that we can see how unable we are to make that change despite its resounding support.
Right,
so,
right. And in my case, so I don't, I no longer own a gun, but I do have a concealed carry permit that I got in 2012. Excuse me. So I mean, and I respect the Second Amendment. I absolutely do. But that doesn't mean that it's without some level of making sure that we can keep folks safe without saying, hey, everybody needs to have a gun all the time without any kind of background check. That doesn't make our communities safer. And I think that's what folks are demanding, that we find ways, not only find ways to make our community safer, but find ways to do it together. And you know, when I talk about gun violence prevention, I don't do it in a way to try to demonize those who may be deemed my opposition. We need a clear path on solving this problem, and it's going to require non-gun owners, gun owners, hunters, sportsmen, Democrats, Republicans, I mean, everybody to come together. And you can, as I stated, you know, when you have more than 90% of Americans wanting it so far, I mean, the fact that we haven't is to me, damn near a crime. But I mean, if we fail to listen to each other and want to engage in just simply yelling at each other rather than solving the problem, more people will die. And I'm not okay with that.
Okay, so let me see if I can get you into a little bit of hot water by burrowing a little bit deeper on the Second Amendment here. So back in the 18th century, the Second Amendment was interpreted by the United States Supreme Court as being focused on the two words "to keep" and "bear arms," where they said to bear arms is a term at the time used in Navy situations, and thus they interpreted on that word as being something only to have to do with militias and organized militias. It wasn't until the early 1900s that a new United States Supreme Court ruled where they put the emphasis on the word keep arms. So my question to you is, should we throw caution to the wind and say, no, we need a complete change in our discourse? We need to talk about what the Second Amendment actually means and intends.
So, in all reality, though, despite those Supreme Court changes or interpretations, the majority of the time our country's been in existence, they didn't view guns the way that we currently do. That change began to happen in the 70s. But beyond that, I'm not of the position where I want to see the Second Amendment overturned or really changed at all. The interpretation is something we can talk about, but I'm not at all interested in trying to drag the country down a road where we are going to fight about whether we keep or do we repeal the Second Amendment. And as far as I'm concerned, it's in the Constitution. I respect it as such. Now, what do we do to make sure we have a society that can work within the constraints of having that amendment and wanting to make our community safe? That's what's important to me.
Okay. That sounds like a very nuanced approach.
Right.
You know that you're going into politics, right?
Yes, I do. But you know, look, man. I'm a father, right? And you know, I'm a man who has to live every day as a gun violence survivor, and I've hugged hundreds and hundreds of fellow gun violence survivors, and it requires me to be able to look beyond just pure ideology. What can we achieve, and what's going to make the most sense? I mean, I can't just sit here and have these just some idea that I can't convince someone else it makes sense to do. I got to be willing to listen. I got to be willing to hear what I don't even like calling him an opponent, but I got to hear what a opponent might say so we can come to an agreement of what's the best way to solve this problem. Because the longer I argue with someone on what we should or shouldn't do or what how we interpret this or how we interpret that, there are going to be 91 people that die every single day. The longer we wait to fix it, the more people will die. And that is simply not acceptable to me. I'm not willing to do that.
Okay. So on your webpage, you have 3 issues, overall subject issues. And under those issues, you have a rough outline on some very targeted things. Are these things that you feel like are very heated in the district that you're running in, or is this simply things that you care more about than other things?
So one of the first things we did after we announced was actually went out and talked to people and find out what matters to them. Now, what matters to me may not always jive with the way the district is going to function. So that's why we didn't have an issues page on our website for the longest time, because look, I can't just say, hey, I'm going to run on this one issue and then I'm going to beat it till the cows come home. I got to talk to folks. I got to talk to voters, people who I need to get to vote for me. What matters to you? And ultimately what I found is public safety, making sure college is more affordable, and making sure that we can do things to create job opportunities for folks. Those are the things that I heard over and over and over. Now, we would hear sporadically from other people different aspects of what Congress has to deal with, whether it's foreign policy or other issues like that. And those issues are important, but the 3 things that I have highlighted on my website are the 3 things that I heard consistently every time I talk to people. But having said that, we will be adding positions later on other topics as the campaign progresses forward. But again, my campaign has only been in existence for 3 months now. So, but again, those are the 3 main things I've been hearing.
Okay, so we have a viewer. We have a constant engagement from the viewership. That's one of the reasons why we're on YouTube. We have a viewer who wants to know what your view on the Sandy Hook family lawsuit is. And I would tack on to that, what is your view of the use of Sandy Hook in the Democratic primary so far?
So I definitely support the Sandy Hook families and their effort to bring about this lawsuit, because it centers around how AR-15 rifles are marketed to the public, and I support their effort to do that. And I believe as it is a fundamental American right to have your day in court. Now, that doesn't mean they should win or that they're going to win. I believe it is a fundamental American right to have your day in court, and then you allow the court, the jury, and the judge to decide what happens from there. And as far as I am concerned, I believe it is important that this issue is at the forefront of the national discussion right now. That is amazingly important as far as I'm concerned. Now, some folks may think, hey, it's a political football or someone's using it for their own advantage. And personally, I literally do not care. I'm glad the issue is at the forefront of the conversation, and that people who have been through a living nightmare. So Erica Smigelski, who is a dear friend of mine, I know her personally in real life. We have literally cried together. Our mothers, we lost both of our mothers due to gun violence. So she and I have a special bond that I wish no one else would have to share with us, but we do. And so I'm glad that she gets to talk about her story and her mother Dawn's story at the national level, because it's important that people see the faces of gun violence. People need to understand that you can't just talk about this issue in the abstract. I mean, people who aren't affected directly by gun violence can talk about these things from an ideological perspective, but unless you have been in it, like Erica and I have, it means something different. So to have it being talked about at the level that it is right now, that's what's important to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's leave the gun topic behind. I think you've answered very thoroughly and very nuanced on it. I'm very happy about that.
Thanks,
so let's move on to, you talk about business and business incentives to provide incentives for small businesses to be able to flourish.
Yes.
So is there a reason why it's small, maybe even medium-sized businesses you want to target?
Oh, absolutely. Because when you look at a small business, those small business owners are the folks that live in your community. Those are the people that you're going to see at the grocery store on Sunday or at church. So it's important to me to want to have a way to incentivize that small business community to want to create opportunities. For one of the things I talk about the most is the small business tax incentive to incentivize the small business community to hire prior felons, so that you can reduce recidivism rates to get some folks back to work. And to me, it is a way to have a person who's had some mistakes in his or her life find a way to integrate back into society and become a productive member of their community again. That is an important thing. But we can't, I don't expect a business, a for-profit business, to do something that's altruistic. They have a profit motive. So I'm looking at a way to combine that profit motive with my desire to want to create opportunity, especially for those who aren't going to get a fair shake now that they've served their debt to society. They want to move forward and do the right thing. But if you look at this just from a moral perspective, I mean, if you can find ways to help a family, right? Think about a child who hasn't seen their parent for a number of years because they've been incarcerated. Now they've come back, and if that parent is always going to be down on their luck, they're going to start engaging in crimes of survival. They're going to find a way to eat. They're going to find a way to put clothes on their back. And if we can't mitigate that difference, I mean, we're never going to solve the problem. And if you can, though, get some folks back to work, those children are going to look up to their parent now that their father or their mom are doing some good things for themselves and feeling more involved, and their self-esteem is back. That is a overwhelming sense of what it means to have redemption, and I think that is important.
So you touched on self-esteem. That this is one of the issues that I really have a stick to beat a dead horse with. Is not just here in America, but unfortunately also in Europe, where I'm from. There is a tendency within the bureaucracies of the governments to strip people of dignity. We can't give you welfare so that you can make it until your next job without having you pee in a cup, and you have to work for a pittance 5 hours away from your home, and if you don't, then you get no more. And oh, your son, he was involved in criminal activity, you can now no longer be in federal housing. You're all a bit like, it seems like stripping people of dignity is a thing we just do without thinking about it anymore. So to give a former felon, or to give a person who's just down on his luck, the ability to straighten the back. Now, work is one way to do that. Are there other ways that you see that we can do that?
I'm sure there have to be, but I think when you look at this proposal, though, and I do believe you're right. I think, by and large, we have a group of people who are in control of our segments of our government, at least, who are in some ways hell-bent on trying to demoralize a segment of our population. And they have done a phenomenal job of doing that. But as long as that cycle continues, as long as we allow those folks to remain in power, we aren't going to be able to stop that kind of process from occurring. When you make people feel that they're less than, that it is okay to cast them aside, how can you be shocked when you have the kind of crime rates and gun homicide rates that we have? How can you, why is this now all of a sudden like, oh my God, we have all this crime? But look at the way we treat people, right? Look at the way we in a lot of ways demonize folks. That is just simply not okay. But until we move past or at least get the people out of positions of power to do those kinds of things, it's going to continue. But this is why, this issue with this tax incentive to hire prior felons is so important to me, because we can mitigate that difference and put some folks back to work and try to help those communities rebuild together, rebuild some families, and really do some good things with it.
Okay, so let's say you get your tax incentive passed through. Now there are some people crying out for something similar happening for people on welfare. Now, how do you prevent that sort of good intention to become the same legislation as the Welfare to Work program?
Mm-hmm. So what I can tell you is that there are, as far as I'm concerned, there have been some smaller local level tax credits that allowed for a company like mine, for example, to hire folks who are disadvantaged in one way or the other, hadn't had a chance to work in a number of months or a year or something like that. You put them back to work, they get a tax incentive, or I would get a tax incentive for doing so. So I know it actually works. I mean, you're not going to have any program that you're gonna find that someone isn't trying to manipulate or abuse it in one way or the other. That's inevitable in everything that happens within human nature. I mean, you have some folks who are just not, in my mind, they're not quality people in that way. They just want to abuse something, and that's in dealing with this kind of thing. You're going to have to talk to folks to find ways to put as many safeguards in place to prevent that as you can. But I'm not naive to think that that's not going to come up. But in part of what I'm going to do is talk to as many people as I can to try to cover as many bases as possible. But again, it's not going to be foolproof. No law is going to be foolproof. But the more people we can bring to the table and have these kind of conversations, the more good we can provide.
Okay, so what I wanted to hear a bit about was like the Welfare to Work program. Bill Clinton, President Clinton, before he signed the bill, he put in front and center an African American woman who had a story about how her finding a job made her daughter proud of her, and then everyone forgot everything about her, and it then turned out that she later committed suicide because she was now working 2 jobs, and she was depressed, she couldn't afford medication, and she was caught in this Welfare to Work program that she just couldn't get out of, and this happened to more and more people. It's even been characterized by some people as a benign form of indentured servitude. Mm-hmm. So when we put in all of these safeguards to make sure that people don't cheat, we unintended, I'm going to be generous and assume that it's unintended, strip people of their dignity. So my question was, how do we make programs that help people with and balance it against people's fears of abuse, but saying that, but we're not going to go too far?
Sure. So when you look at it this way, in terms of this specific tax credit, it costs about $30,000 a year to incarcerate a person. So any amount less than that is a benefit. I mean, we can help reduce that expense, and then you're going to have a person who's going to be earning. And in my mind, what I want it to be is a family supporting wage. I'm not as far as we're concerned today, I don't have that number of what that wage rate would be. It surely would not be the minimum wage, that's for sure. So to answer the question in regards to is someone going to have to work 2 jobs, the idea of this tax credit isn't so that someone just gets a $725 an hour job. It's so they can get a job that pays them a family supporting wage, where they would work 1 job, right? So that they could help build a career and and really get into a company. I mean, because this next person that gets into this program could be the next big thing, who's got the next great idea. We just needed some help along the way. But in addition to that, we're going to have to make sure that once I do win this seat and I'm able to bring this bill up, that I work with my counterparts so that we can address issues as they come up. But that's part of the problem that we've seen so far in our legislature, especially at the federal level. Something happens on one side, the opposite side doesn't want to do anything to help fix it. That can't keep happening. That stalemate is really, they do that kind of thing. It's like they're playing a game of chess with our lives, right? That's not acceptable. We need to make sure we have people in the positions of power to prevent those kinds of things from happening, so that we can actually make progress, right? That's what we're here for. We want to make things better, make folks' lives better. But while they're playing games over there, people are struggling. And that there's no way you can be an honest person and say that that's acceptable.
Well, I can only agree with that. So would you support the Fight for 15 movement publicly? Or you equivocated a bit on a number as what the living wage should be, but would you support the Fight for 15?
Here's what I've said about that, and actually I do support that movement. I honestly do. I support the fact that they are fighting for something that they believe in, and who couldn't get behind that, right? That is I believe the essence of how this country came about to where it is now. But beyond that, I think if you look at Washington State, when I believe it's Seattle, where they passed their minimum wage increase, and I believe that is actually beyond 15 from what I remember. What they did is they brought key stakeholders together from the issue, whether it's the advocates, the small business community, civic leaders. They brought them all together and had a conversation. What is the best solution to do this? And they chose an incremental way of achieving that objective. And so I believe it is staged out over or phased in over a couple years that the rate will go up, but they have a plan to get there. That's the method that I support in getting there. I mean, as a president of a small business, I could not absorb a dramatic increase in what the cost for my employees' pay would be. Now, in my case, I don't pay anyone anywhere near the minimum wage, so that kind of thing wouldn't hurt. But when you're talking about increasing the pay of someone, I think if we don't include the people who are involved in that entire process, including the employers, you are risking having it unfoiled just a few years later. So if you look at how, with the Affordable Care Act, people were running in 2012 as saying, hey, I'm running because I oppose the Affordable Care Act, right? And I'm going to go there to dismantle this thing. If we can't include people in this process, that will continue to happen. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to see that happen. So if we are fortunate to increase the minimum wage, and we are able to do so with getting buy-in from the small business, especially the small business community, we have a better chance of having something that is far more substantial than just having us just ram it down someone's throat and it doesn't go anywhere after that.
Okay. So we are running a little bit out of time. We have 4 minutes left, I'm being told. So I want to see if I can get you to tell me who would you support for the nomination of your party?
So I'm going to answer this question honestly. Mm-hmm. Now, I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I firmly believe that we have two of the most talented and skilled politicians running on the Democratic side right now. And it is, to me, it is rather inspiring to see the way that they're having a rather adult level conversation about real issues that matter to people like you and I, to regular people, compared to the clown show that you're saying on the right. And when you look at it from that comparison, I am more than happy. I'm thrilled that we get to choose one of the two of them. And I would be completely happy with whether it's Bernie Sanders or whether it's Secretary Hillary Clinton. I am okay with the both of them, because when you measure this of what we could get, if it's not one of them, that is not an America I am looking forward to living in. But even besides that, I think the way that the issues that they're talking about, the way that they're talking about them, is rather inspiring for younger folks like myself to find, how do I get into politics? Can I be inspiring, right? Can I talk to people in a way that's going to make them want to turn out in ways that they may not have done before? I live in Wisconsin's largest Republican district. How can I inspire people to want to do something where we've been told for so long that this district is so gerrymandered, it's so unwinnable, that why bother showing up? And what you're seeing now from both Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders is a way to inspire people, and I appreciate that. I personally, I'm enjoying the way that they are doing things. I don't like the negativity thing. I don't really get into that. That's never been something I've appreciated. But I want to be inspired, and I want to be able to inspire people to vote for me too. Okay,
so you will not endorse any of the?
No. And the reason I'm not endorsing it is because I'm a fan of both of them, and at the same time, I have people in my district that support both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And what I think we need to look at, though, is while the presidential race at the national level is important, it's down-ticket races that are going to make the fundamental difference that will bring about the change that we are demanding. Again, we can't. It's not just going to be a president that's going to change these things, man. Whether it is a President Sanders or a President Clinton, These things that we are fighting for aren't going to happen simply because it's one of the two of them in there. If they don't have a Congress that's going to work with them, then it really doesn't matter. We're going to be back to square one where we are right now with a Republican-controlled House and Senate, and you can't have any progress. That's what we want, right? We're fighting for progress, and unless we make the effort to get folks like myself in the House and pick up some more seats and get folks like Senator Russ Feingold in the Senate, the kind of things we're going to fight for are going to be much more harder to achieve without us in there.
Okay. Khary Penebaker, thank you so much for joining us here on our first show, and thank you so much for your candor and your direct approach to these topics and issues. I hope you've enjoyed your interview here.
Yeah, so people can check out our website at KharyForCongress.com. I mean, anybody can find me on Twitter because I tweet so much. So my personal account is just at KharyP. My campaign Twitter account is at Khary, the number 4 Congress. We have a Facebook page. I'm very active in social media. I don't really shy away from questions. I'm pretty open with how I deal with things. As you can see here, I'm an honest guy. I just literally want to make a difference. And as much as I want to get money out of politics, we still need money, man. We have to raise as much money as we can so we can put some things in place so I can hire the right people, have the right kind of staff so that I can actually literally make history in this district.
Okay. That's how you get up with Khary. Otherwise, check out the chat on YouTube. There's his information has been posted there several times, or you can, when the video is uploaded, you'll be able to find contact information for Khary in our information section under the video. Khary, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll now be moving.
Thanks for having me tonight, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. We'll now be moving on to our next segment, Richard.
Absolutely. And I know we did want to come back to some of the news stories. I know Chat had mentioned them and that they were on our agenda to discuss about North Carolina. I know for sure we wanted to mention, and I think that, and Alabama, I believe, too, and there was a couple other things that we wanted to get to. So if you wanted to, I don't know if we want to touch on those now or...
Yeah, sure.
Dive in.
I can go on talking all day. So, yeah, we have the last stories we have are 3 stories that have come about the last couple of days, and they have to do with my home state of North Carolina and their LGTB legislation with regards to bathrooms. So what happened was earlier this week, the Department of Justice wrote a letter to the North Carolina legislature telling them that their HB2 bill, their law, it's not a bill anymore, it's an enacted law, unfortunately, violates the Civil Rights Acts of Title IX and I believe Title VI. And this is a pretty big deal because so far it's only been celebrities and a couple of corporations that has spoken out about it. But the Department of Justice actually urging the legislature to reconsider their law and getting it in line with the Civil Rights Act is a pretty big step to be taken from the Obama administration. Unfortunately, the response by North Carolina State House Speaker Tim Moore says that we will take no action by Monday. The deadline will come and go. We don't ever want to lose any money, but we are not going to get bullied by the Obama administration to take action prior to the deadline set. That's not how this works. I don't know what he's talking about when he say this works, if he means being in violation of the Civil Rights Act. But for those of us who had hoped that it could end here, it seems like it will take a case being brought to the Supreme Court for this to be finally put to rest as actually being what it is in violation of the Civil Rights Act. We are hoping to bring you some personal stories here from North Carolina about this, how it affects everyday people, parents of children, how it affects, well, the children themselves, and how it affects adults. And I can tell you that in Alabama, the city of Alabama, they also did a bathroom bill some months ago, but they have now recalled it because they could see that it was a draconian law and that it was against the Civil Rights Act, reports the Washington Post. Their bill would have punished violations, meaning a woman walking into a woman's bathroom. They would have punished that violation with up to 6 months incarceration. So it has been recalled, fortunately. We can only hope that North Carolina state legislature will follow suit. And as I said, we hope to bring you some more personal stories and interviews here from North Carolina, how this legislation and even the attitude that has allowed this kind of legislation to be passed in North Carolina, how this affects people in every day. If you yourself have been experiencing discrimination of this sort, or have know of situations or even organizations who are fighting laws like these, please have them contact us, tell us about these stories. They, in my opinion, my personal opinion, which is on this issue in no way objective, have to stop. It's that simple. Yeah, so those were the three last stories that have been breaking over the last couple of days, at least domestically, that I wanted to get into. Richard, I know that you have recently been at a Seattle State Convention in seeing democracy unfold in front of your eyes in a 3.5 hour long session. Why don't you tell us something about your experience and show the footage that you have created?
Absolutely, thank you, Nis. And I just wanted to mention on the discrimination law out of North Carolina in particular, I've seen reports that essentially it was somewhat of a Trojan horse, probably a bad example, but essentially that there's suspicions that they intentionally put that provocative thing to draw attention away from some other parts of the bill. I haven't had a chance to actually dive into the bill itself to know exactly what people are talking about, but that they're saying that there are a lot of other very questionable things that were attached with that, and that the headlines were focused on that part of it, and so that they're going to probably end up scrapping that part and then keeping the rest and hoping that that flies under the radar as a result. So keep an eye on that, folks, and pay attention, especially. I know folks in North Carolina especially are paying attention, but it's important that all of us around the country pay attention, because as was pointed out by some people on Twitter and elsewhere, some of the Democrats some of the people that voted for that law are Democrats and are supporting Hillary Clinton, and so it's important to know where the appeal is and who it is and who's supporting these types of bills, and know that it's not always just a strictly party line thing. So you can't assume that because you're voting for somebody with a D next to their name that they're not going to support something like this, particularly in North Carolina. And so I think that's really important. But as far as my experience at the convention, on a somewhat lighter note, you mentioned 3.5 hours. It was 3.5 hours to get seated, and that seated is not necessarily as in to go and take a seat. That only took a few moments. How the process works is the delegates. All right, I don't know if everybody's familiar with what the county convention is, but essentially what it is, I'll start there, is that the delegates that were elected at the precinct and legislative district level for Bernie and Hillary go to the Democratic Party platform convention for the local county. And at the local county level, we discuss resolutions, our platform as a county, and recommendations that we want to make to the state party, essentially. And so in that process, one of the things that you have to do is you have to seat the delegates, which is essentially finding out who those people are, did they show up, and making sure that they get their credentials so that when votes are called, that we can identify that the person that's voting has a right to vote or whatever, has by the rules influence in the decisions on the party, on the platform, on those types of things. And so that process, which essentially is going in, they have binders full of names for each district, or divided however that particular place does it. Usually a couple districts are per person, and you can line up and they find your name, and hopefully you've been properly registered by the folks that were supposed to send the information on to the party, and hopefully that information came back out of the party to the people that needed that information at that point. We had issues at the precinct level, definitely, with that, and less, but still plenty of issues at the legislative district with that, or I should say at the convention and the legislative district. And so that process shouldn't take quite that long. I mean, we were supposed to have, I want to say, around 1,500 to 2,000 delegates show up. There were only 500-ish, so there was a significant drop-off. There was definitely more Bernie than Hillary. I'm proportionally, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it looked like they proportionately dropped about the same, and so that it didn't influence the level of influence that we had at this particular convention. But it was a disappointing turnout. There was an issue of people being under the impression that they had to, excuse me, I don't know why I've been doing this the whole time, making you sit on screen with me. Sorry about that, Ness. And so there was an issue about people having to donate $25 to $50 to get there. There's confusion because there is a fee to be a seated delegate at the state level of $50. It was just a suggested fee at the county level convention in order to pay for the building. One of the clips that I'm going to show has some on it, and actually, you know what? That's actually a good time to show you what it looked like in general there. So let me just pull that up here real quick. Did that make sense to you, Nis, while I'm getting that ready?
Yeah. I mean, we have to remember that how the sauce is made is never a pretty sight. But as long as it doesn't involve kickbacks and millions of dollars, I can't see how the process itself shouldn't just be open to the public. I can't see how there has to be closed rooms, closed doors, and all this secrecy. I mean, when you're talking national security, of course, it makes some sense. But why it shouldn't just be as transparent as can be, and not just transparent, but easily transparent, so that it doesn't take a political science major to sift through the information.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and we'll get maybe I'll be able to. I don't think I found a digital copy of the county platform yet, but if I am able to find it, I'll make sure to throw it in the description of the shortened up version of this clip or something, and so that you can find what we actually ended up voting on. But right now I have the video just to give you an idea of the size and how many. This is not the most people that were in the room at the time or throughout the event, but it's a pretty good feel of about how many people showed up versus how many people were expected. You don't get to see behind us where my particular district had 100-something delegates selected, and probably a couple dozen of us showed up. So I was disappointed there, but anyway, here's the video.
Right here in Washington, and Congress is a battleground county. Right here in Washington, and Congressman Kilmer just mentioned it, we have a Republican-controlled Senate, we have a slim majority in the House, and with your help, 2016 can be an incredible year for Democrats. So let me ask you this, and I'm going to conclude. Let me ask you this. Standing together, can we elect a Democratic president and make sure that Jay Inslee stays as our governor? What do you say, Democrats?
And And I know Nis, due to our studio setup at the moment, Nis wasn't able to actually witness that live, so he may be being able to see it on his monitor now as we're talking. And so just to give him an idea of what we're looking at. But then what Nis didn't hear, most likely, is that over the speaker, the audience heard a woman asking, "Are we ready to elect a Democrat president?" and mentioned Governor Inslee and asked if we were going to be able to support Inslee. And there's very mixed reaction there. And that particular room is strongly Bernie favored. And so we have some issues with a lot of our superdelegates not appreciating our particular perspectives on who we'd like them to vote for. And so when the party comes to us saying that they want us to get in line behind somebody that's had somewhat of a lacking performance in general, the enthusiasm was not quite there, as you'll see later, versus something like when we were voting to, as a party and platform, be against TPP for a variety of reasons. So I guess, let me just take a peek here on what the next one, was from, the next clip I have is from the TPP section. And what I really want to do here is give our viewers an opportunity to see what's happening when you hear or don't hear a report about the state level convention or the county level conventions where things are going on. This is the type of room that it is. This is generally how it goes, and it's generally operating under what's called Robert's Rules of Order or whatever. And if you're not familiar, it's basically a long built compendium of rules about how to organize groups and to make rules and so on and so forth. So similar to how Congress has their rules about how they decide what they're going to pass, or if they're going to pass, or who gets to speak, and all those kinds of things. It handles those, and it's supposed to be accessible for a common person, but we do have some issues with, I know myself, I don't know, Nis has familiarity with it, but I know myself, I'm not keen on the nuance of it, and so I'm pretty much flying by the seat of my pants and trusting that other people know what the rules are. And so, Nis, are you familiar with Robert's Rules at all?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, and so that is, oh, sorry. Seems to be that we're getting some static.
Yeah, let's see if muting me helps.
It's like, I'm not hearing it, so it might be on my side somehow. I don't, maybe it's my hair is rubbing the mic, maybe? I don't know what kind of static we're getting, so I apologize for that. And apologize for not seeing that there. Or I don't know, we have to wait for the delay to see if we're getting the results we're looking for here, so apologize for that. Again, still working out some technical issues. I appreciate you all bearing with us, and just about 45 minutes away from the Benjamin Dixon show, so just want to thank you guys again for tuning in, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to know when we or Anoa or any of the other upcoming shows go live, and especially the Benjamin Dixon show. And okay, looks like we were having some sort of static from Nis, so hopefully we'll be able to sort that out. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead, and once I get this queued up here for us, we will go to the video so you can see what it was like passing that resolution I mentioned about TPP. And here we go.
Motion passes. Proposed resolution number 5, reject the Trans-Pacific Partnership for economic, political, and humanitarian reasons. Moved and seconded. Anyone wish to comment? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your card. All those opposed?
One comment.
Passed.
One comment.
Item number 6, I hear a point of order. Someone is yelling.
One comment.
How are you? Thank you.
Make it good. I had a comment on number, what is it? On the trans.
We already voted. It's off.
I know, but Hannah, you didn't.
We've already moved on. Thank you. Item number 6, failure to enforce trade laws.
That was the current one.
We adopted it though, didn't we?
Ma'am, we voted, we all voted on it. It's already moved someplace.
At the part where somebody
Madam Chair.
make an argument.
We've already moved on.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair,
Maybe longer than just
Yes.
your talk.
this woman that wanted to speak, she had her hand up at the beginning. She had her hand up the whole time. Now, maybe people need to be told to stand up, but there might be some people that can't stand up, so I think we need to take a little more care in looking around to see if anybody has something to say.
At the discretion of the chair, please speak.
I would like an addition to that, and that there should be something on there for re-education of people that have lost their jobs. And I don't see anything on the resolutions or on the, whatever it's called, that says anything about that in any of these papers that I'm reading.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, and so what you see there, along with the vote of passing the resolution, is what can happen when Robert's rules and a large group of people and 4 or 5 hours of waiting to get on with the meeting, and the natural contention of political discourse and a variety of audience members that can be of varying levels of informed, whether it be on the resolution itself, the process, or how it goes about. And as you saw there, and I think a lot of people noticed at the time, was that the chair was a bit rough with the whole situation. And I think a lot of Bernie supporters, you heard some gasping and some sighing and some like, well, wait a minute, and like we wanted to move along quickly. Lots of people wanted to do that, and so you could tell he was in a rush, that the chair was. But at the same time, he was a little overly dismissive of somebody wanting to speak, and that he had missed her following the proper rules, and in order to do that. And so things like that happen on the House and Congress floor all the time, where people will try to break the rules, and if nobody's there to call them on it, they can get away with it. Or if the temperature of the room is such a way that the people have the opinion that, you know, we just need to get past this and move on to the next thing, rules can get broken, and voices can be closed out or shut down. And that's just one part of what happens in the messiness of democracy. And so I thought it was really important that people see that part. And I know Nis wasn't able to actually see all of that, but hopefully that description gave him enough that he was able to...
We have a question concerning the video. Digita83 thought he heard them call out protect the TPP, and someone else thinks that they said reject the TPP. Can you clarify for them?
Yes, just so that everybody knows, the resolutions are presented in text, and most of them were able to get submitted with the platform that people unfortunately weren't able to look at before this meeting, but were given when they arrived, or were able to access when they arrived, so they could read through it while we were waiting for everything to take place. And in that, it said reject the TPP. And so at least my county will be telling Washington State Democrats that the Democratic platform at the National Convention will need to support, or will need to reject the TPP. And so hopefully other Washington counties get on board, and hopefully we can get that adopted at the state level. That's why it's important for every single delegate to show up to make sure that we can get every single vote. If people think that it's over and it doesn't matter anymore, the voting and what good could it do to go to a state convention, it's critical that you show up to the state convention, so that not only that we can get those things on the platform from the state level, but that we can hold people accountable. One of the other resolutions that we're putting forward is regarding our super delegates and how we would like them to move forward. And so I'll just actually jump right into that, because we're starting to get a little short, and I did want to cover quite a bit about Cinco de Mayo. And so I'll just get into this real quickly. Let me get it queued up here. Get the audio here. And I think this is at the right spot, and it's a bit long. So just bear with me. I just again want to reiterate how I want to show everyone what this process looks like for those of you who had never been to something like this, or maybe not even participated in a student government type thing where you do a very small mocked version of this. Coincidentally, I did at the same facility at Pierce College, and so I have some familiarity with this. So it was interesting for me personally to see the difference between when it was, 5 of us on a council and 2 people who showed up to listen to us, one from the newspaper who also happened to be part of the student government, and one person that just happened to be passing by, kind of thing. And so to see this with what was a poor turnout considering, but was still a lot more people than would typically go to something like this, I thought it was very important to see how that actually functions. So here we go. There we go.
Hi, my name is Lee Hubert. I'm from the 27464. I want to suggest that we consider amending this to only essentially have this take place in the event of a candidate receiving a majority of the delegates. We've seen it, I don't want to have unintended consequences essentially of this, but if we had a race of more than 2 people, this, as stated, I believe this resolution could result in the opposite effect that the grassroots movement is looking for. I just wanted to put that, I haven't thought about the wording of it quite yet because I'm looking at this pretty newly, so I don't know about the exact wording, but just wanted to put that thought out there. It'd be very easy to amend. If a candidate wins the majority of the delegates, then the unpledged delegates would be required to vote with the pledged delegates.
Sir, I believe that can be considered at the state level.
Okay.
Is there any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a comment, just a point of information. The time is now 6:08 p.m. We are now trying to run top fuel dragster on a super stock budget. Thank you.
I'd like to move to amend.
Please.
I don't know. I wasn't really quite sure what.
In light of seeking proportional representation, which is what we're having an issue with the superdelegates, winner take all is not any more proportional than the situation we have right now. And to address his point, if we had more than 2 people in the race, I would like to propose instead of requiring them all to cast their vote for the candidate who won the most pledged delegates, I would like to propose that they are required to vote proportional to the public vote.
Yeah, second.
That has been moved and seconded. Does anyone wish to speak to this? Balaquin.
If this happened, how would we determine which elected and unpledged delegates would vote for each particular candidate? And if that went against their opinion?
I don't know. How did he get selected now? At least we'll have a say-so in that process.
Who else we got? We need, okay, where did you go? The lady who made the amendment, please come to the front. Any other comments?
Is that all right?
Yes.
Chair, bro.
Lady in black.
Mr. Chair, are we looking for a affirmative, someone in support or someone against the amendment?
Against.
Oh, well then that's me. I've been waiting to talk. I actually considered amendment very close to what was just proposed. It is something I've been thinking about for requiring, it would be too difficult to decide which of the superdelegates would be required to vote for which candidate.
Oh, well, let's just listen to you then, huh?
Is there any other comments? Seeing none, we're going to take a vote. All those in favor of that amendment, please raise your hand. This is for the proportionality amendment. All those in favor, please raise your card. Drop them. All those opposed? Motion passed. Motion fails. Amendment has failed. We are now to the underlying resolution to amend the charter of the Washington State Democratic Party. All those in favor, please raise your card. Drop them. All those opposed?
Sorted at the state level, in which case
resolution passes.
So there, what you saw there was at the very beginning, you saw discussion about amending the resolution so that the superdelegates were awarded proportionally as opposed to winner take all. And then you saw some discussion between different perspectives on that. And what you're seeing there, and I tried to play out as much as I could, time permitting, is just what this process looks like, in that it's not a well-oiled, smooth process. And one of the reasons I think that honest, good people can end up trying to push people out of the process is just in like any group project. You can have group members that are helping your group succeed, and you can have group members that are hurting your group. And I think in an effort to prevent people that are going to hurt the order, the functionality of a meeting like that. So let's say if somebody was constantly interrupting people that were on the microphone, or if they were doing various other things, in order to discourage those types of people from showing up to an event like this, or smaller precinct or local level events, they end up blocking out people who just may not be used to it, may not know the rules, may have grown up in different circumstances where learning the rules wasn't really an option for them, or not anything on their priority list anyway. And there's just a whole lot of people that end up getting shut out instead of just the people that are there to be unruly in a way that isn't productive, that doesn't bring attention to important issues or anything along those lines. And so, but beyond that, it makes it tough to do all of this. What I didn't show you, and I was thinking about putting together a highlight, but I had some technical issues with my computer and my editing software, was just some of the repeated rudeness that came from the people speaking towards the audience, some of the rudeness back from the audience towards those speaking, and just some of the realness that happens at a local political level. And so I think people, if you haven't gone to a local meeting, please go. Find it. It may be hard to find. Lots of your local groups have local pages up, especially with Bernie supporters. So if that's where you're at, then that's a really great way to get it in. And the more of you that show up, the more influence you have when decisions get made. One of an old adage or whatever is whoever's not at the table is the one that's going to get hosed. And so if you're not showing up to the tables where they're making decisions about what's going on in your city, your county, your state, then you're not going to get considered. That's just what the reality of our political situation today. And so with that in mind, I really, really hope that the sloppiness or the messiness that is democracy doesn't put you off from engaging at all. You don't have to go to meetings where there's 1,000 people or 500 people. Just going to meetings where there's normally 5 people and you showing up can be all the difference. Or if there's normally 6, you could be that person that swings it towards the Democrats that think like you do. And so it's really important that you show up and that you get engaged wherever you can, whether that's within the Democratic Party, the Green Party, if you want to try and start a new party. All those are things that I would like to get more into, but I really wanted to cover Cinco de Mayo, and so I'm going to make sure I leave myself some time for that. I wish I wasn't the one that ended up doing this, but I was not able to get somebody on to speak more about this that has more personal connection to it. But basically, I wanted to make sure to include Cinco de Mayo in today's show, since it is Cinco de Mayo, but I thought it was important to really understand what Cinco de Mayo was, and in my research, I became more aware and more contextualized about what actually happened, why it's celebrated, why it's basically an American holiday now, and all of that. And so I just want to get Nis in here to give myself a chance to get a drink, and if he had some things that he wanted to add or comment on, to be able to speak on some of this. You are muted right now, I believe.
And I'm unmuted. So, yes, I promised to try and speak to the trade agreements. That was Digita83 and I having a conversation in the chat where he very naturally has some resentment towards Obama for supporting the TPP and pushing the TPP as I believe he put it in the chat, he got elected by communities that he's now hurting. And it is natural to have that kind of resentment towards that. I try to reserve judgment because I have not tried to sit behind the resolute desk. I have not tried to be surrounded by extremely powerful people, very experienced people, older people, all of them telling me that I have to do this or calamity ensues, while I, in the back of my head, know that I have the fate of millions of people in my hands. So I try not to judge. I try being a sergeant, having a group of 12 men report to me and be responsible for their lives and well-being. And that to me was quite enough. I cannot imagine what it's like if you add a few 100 million to that number. That being said, a person should stick to his guns, to his principles. But I try to imagine a situation in which I get a CIA briefing every day on 12 different topics, and then I get an NSA briefing every day on 12 different topics, and then I'm told that there's a crisis about this, and I'm told we have to do something to stimulate the economy, and I'm told, and I cannot be an expert on all of it. So I have to rely on advice. So with regards to extremely complicated trade agreements, do you yourself try to fashion them, or do you rely on advisors? Now, it is very clear to us that there are many people against the TPP, and that there are many people against the TTP/IP, which is the European trade agreement that America is trying to get through, which has many of the same statutes, which basically hands power to corporations and makes any regulation in any country that in any way prohibits a company making a profit an illegal regulation, and it would supersede any EU law, and it already supersedes in some cases US law. For example, it is no longer legal for the US to demand that all meat should be marked with its origination, where the meat comes from, where the cow was butchered, and so on and so forth. That can no longer be a regulation. That was upheld by a court for one of the trade agreements. This is not a US court. This is a court established by the trade agreement itself, which all the signatories to the trade agreement promises to abide by. This court doled out millions of dollars in fines every day until the United States complied with the ruling of the court stating that U.S. meat companies being able to advertise that they have their meat from the U.S. is an unfair competition to meat companies trying to sell their meat in the U.S., but where the meat originates from outside the U.S. And thus it was upheld by the court, and thus the United States had to comply or face paying fines every day. So to the tune of millions of dollars. So I'm not a fan of these trade agreements, and the opposition to these trade agreements are readily apparent to anyone who follows this kind of news. But you have to ask yourself, is it apparent to a man who basically lives in a bubble called the White House? Access to the President of the United States is one of the highest values in the world. That includes the access of information being given to him. It includes access of talking to him. It includes access of being the one briefing him. It is one of the highest commodities in the world. So you have to ask yourself, yeah, you know from watching TV. Now ask yourself, how would he know? How would he know that unions all over are protesting? How would he know that this is something that the public does not want if he's constantly being briefed that, oh, it's just a few cranks and you shouldn't pay attention to this? So I try not to judge in a situation like this. I am vehemently against these trade agreements. I want them gone. But in the case of President Obama, because he started out so inexperienced, because he was immediately surrounded by people telling him what he couldn't do, I try to withhold harsh judgment. I hope that gives you some nuance, Digita 83.
I think that was excellent personally, and I sincerely appreciate that. That's a lot better than the I just like him that I had been sticking with for giving him a pass on TPP. Not so much a pass, but like I had a similar thought process that basically said that I'm not in that position. I don't know what he's facing. I don't know what information he has access to. That's something that I hadn't really put at the front of my mind. And so I think those are very important details because I had a very guttural response on TPP also when I found out, wait, this is the Obama administration is pushing this? Like, I don't understand, like, what's going on. And you can go back to check the channel and look at the Scandinavian Perspective episode that we did with the trade deal in Panama about how these trade deals and these courts particularly end up being not what we would consider a courtroom in as twisted as our courtrooms can be. It often doesn't meet the same expectations that we might have of the courtroom, and so that word can be a bit misleading. And so with that, I'm really glad that you said it was Digita 83 that brought that up. Is that yeah, that's yeah, I appreciate that, Digita. Thank you for mentioning that. And so with that, I do want to touch on Cinco de Mayo, and I don't have perhaps maybe as much time as I'd like, but I think I have enough time to give you all the gist of what I was going after. I can't help but when looking at things like this, but put them in some historical context. And I know myself, when I think about things in history, I know a date of one thing, but sometimes I don't coordinate things that are happening simultaneously or in the same general time frame, because of either geographical differences or the people that would fixate on the type of news that would come out of that history. And so touching on what was going on, what the United States and Mexico and part of Europe looked like in the 1800s. In early 1800s, the Louisiana Purchase took place, where we bought the land, a big chunk of land in the United States that left pretty much just Texas and the southwest coast, including California, out of what would be the United States. And so after that, on September 16th in 1810 is when Mexican Independence Day, the event that took place, is actually there. So I guess to just recap on that, Cinco de Mayo is not Mexican Independence Day. So if anybody in this chat, I doubt it is so much of our viewers, but I know that people may know people or know of people that think that Cinco de Mayo is the celebration of Mexicans' independence. That is not what Cinco de Mayo is. That date is on September 16th, and that is a national holiday. Cinco de Mayo, however, is not, the area formerly known as Mexico, Rachel or Rochelle mentioned. That is not what Cinco de Mayo is. Cinco de Mayo is a holiday about a battle in the region of Puebla, city, town, state. It's been all of them. And so at the time, it was a city. The Battle of Puebla was about an invasion. But before I get into the invasion, I want to talk a little bit more about what preceded immediately this invasion. After its independence, Mexico in 1821 tried a monarchy for a little bit, and that didn't work out, so they switched to a republic in 1824, about 3 years later. And they were living on an unstable republic for a little over 20 years until 1846. There had been lots of issues with Native American populations in the West Mexican territory, so your California, your Arizona, your New Mexico. Well, Mexico thought it was Mexican territory. The Native Americans had a different perspective, just to put that into some context. And so there was that, and the Mexican government was essentially remnants of the Spanish government, but taken over by indigenous Mexican people, just to try to recover some of that history. Because when I heard about the Western expansion and the manifest destiny and what all of that meant, it meant something very different than what I was getting from the my reading of what was going on historically. And so just to give you, so we went into the Mexican-American War in 1946, or 1846, sorry. And there's much dispute about how that started. My reading of history essentially is that we more or less started it. I mean, it was not, of all people's land that it definitely wasn't ours. James Polk, President Polk, when he first came in, decided that manifest destiny was his thing. He had a dream that California would be his legacy, that he would bring California into the Union, stretching the United States from coast to coast and making it a powerhouse, and leaving him sorry about that for the camera thing. Anyway, he thought he was going to do the manifest destiny, and he was going to make that his legacy, and so he was going to stop at nothing to make it happen. So he offered Mexico a deal to buy the land from about Arizona through California. Mexico, while they were in dire straits, didn't like the deal. I can't really contextualize the deal about whether the terms were favorable or not. I don't know that much of the detail. But essentially, Polk said, okay, no deal, then we're just going to take it by force. And so over the next 2 years, Mexico and the United States went to war. Texas, in this time frame, was in between being part of the United States and being part of Mexico. They sided with the United States during this conflict as they were annexed right before it, I should say. And so with that, that was the state of the Mexican Republic. It had gone through monarchy, it had been ruled by Spain, tried its own monarchy, switched to a republic, struggled under that, went to war with the United States to defend its land, lost that war, conceded all of the territory of what is the modern day states of California, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, conceded all of that land to the United States in exchange for an end to the war. And it's at that point that they enter into what was known as the Reform War in Mexico. And to give you an idea of what the Reform War was, is it was took place between 1858 and 1861, and it was basically a civil war in Mexico that pitted liberals who believed in the separation of church and state and freedom of religion, and against the conservatives who favored a tight bond between the Roman Catholic Church and the Mexican state. And so between all of the previous wars and turmoil and this last war, the Mexican treasury was nearly bankrupt. And on July 17th, 1861, Mexican President Benito Juarez issued a moratorium on all foreign debt payments, saying, we're not going to pay any of you for 2 years. And in response, France, Britain, and Spain sent small navy armadas over to say, we still want our money, and you making a proclamation isn't going to be good enough. And so Britain and Spain were able to negotiate deals with President Juarez, but Spain was not able to come to terms. Partially, it's suggested in part due to Napoleon III thinking that this was a good time, and the French government thinking that this was a good time to start a Latin American empire. And so Mexico City in Mexico was going to be their first crowning jewel in that Latin American empire, and the pretext of them not paying was great pretext in order to invade, and so they refused any workable deals and went ahead and invaded. That invasion is what leads us to what Cinco de Mayo is actually about for the people of Puebla. And down there, so basically what happened was Napoleon III came on shore, and they planned on marching right through Mexico City and just decimating the people. President Juarez had a different plan. He sent a small contingent of slightly more than, your run-of-the-mill, not really soldiers, but just basically people, townsfolk that were slightly military inclined. sent about 2,000 of them to the city of Puebla, and when they arrived there to defend the city against 6,000 invading Frenchmen. And the 6,000 invading Frenchmen of Napoleon III's army were what were considered at the time a top-notch, the top-notch military in the world at the time. And so the idea of Mexican farmers mixed with some soldiers and 2,000 of them holding off 6,000 French soldiers would be laughable in any room at the time. And despite that, those 2,000 Mexican soldiers held their ground against those 6,000 French soldiers who were better armed and better trained. And for that, there was a huge celebration in the town of Puebla that about fending off against impossible odds an invading power. So that's what the holiday was about. That's the event that it was commemorating. Now, there are some details that don't usually get hashed out, and we're starting to run up, so I'm gonna make sure I get everything in time. Is that essentially that battle was glorious, and those people fought hard, and they did a great job. It was the French lost 500 soldiers, and the 2,000 Mexicans only lost 100 of their soldiers, so they outkilled them 5-1, a superior force in what would seem every way, and they had some defensive. They were in a defensive position, but not even that would account. That it wasn't so defensive that it would account for such dominance against such uneven odds. And so that is, it was a very heroic tale, and it still is in that part of Mexico. But getting back to that, it's not about Mexican Independence Day. It's not a national holiday. It's not largely celebrated around the country of Mexico. It's probably more so now. I mean, I haven't personally been to Mexico, but I'm sure there's plenty of tourists and all of that stuff. So other parts of Mexico probably do have some celebrations, but as far as the Mexican culture itself, it's an important day. But the whole losing to the French within the year after that, and the French installing a monarch, dictator, whatever you want to call it, shortly afterward, it does not leave such a pleasant memory for folks. So people outside of that area that have a personal connection, you know, that their family members fought in that battle or whatever, it's not as fond of a time for them to remember. Now, also, so why do we celebrate that in America? What does that have to do with America? Why do non-Mexican Americans celebrate it, and what about Mexican Americans? I can't really comment on Mexican Americans myself, but for generic non-Mexican Americans, I feel I can opine or shine some light as to how it became a holiday in the U.S. In the U.S., essentially what was also happening both during the Reform Civil War down in Mexico and then during the French invasion was the Civil War, our Civil War. And in our Civil War, we obviously, I mean, I think people have various opinions about what we were fighting for, but one of the things that came out, or that was implanted into it, was that memory. So people are familiar with Remember the Alamo. That's a popular chant and so on and so forth. Essentially, the Battle of Puebla was, or I want to say it's Puebla, it might be Pueblo, I could be saying that wrong, so I apologize if anybody knows, and I am doing that wrong. But anyway, that battle was essentially what was actually really a more popular rallying cry during the Civil War. And so as a result of Americans glorifying that, fighting back against impossible odds and all of that stuff, it became ingrained into American pop culture. And from there, it's morphed into, within the United States, people call it a lot of things. Some people say it's a celebration of Mexican culture. Some people still think it's the Mexican Independence Day. Some people think it's just a reason to get drunk at work. Some people think that's referring to a newscast that was a while back where they were walking around in a poncho, in a hat, and drinking tequila on the news set. That is not the kind of news that we plan on delivering here at Project Sanity. So that person knows who they are. Anyway, so how, in my view, how it became a part of American culture is through that glorification through the Civil War. And the irony being that neither the actual battle nor the glorification through the Civil War have anything to do with what we say we're celebrating now when people say that they're trying to respectfully celebrate Cinco de Mayo, or if they're just blatantly commercializing it. And so I think that's really important. And so that's one thing I really wanted to mention. We are short on time, and I do have to get out of here very soon. And so I want to thank everybody for showing up. And I want everybody, thank you for sharing the link to the show to let people know that we're on. We'll be back next Thursday, same time, same channel. And we'll be having some new stuff for you. And I have some more things to say, but I want to let Nis get in some parting words before we run short on time. And I think he still wants to do the closing video. So in order to do that, I think we're going to be short. So keep that in mind. That's about 1:19. Nis.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for that very good story about Cinco de Mayo. So, yeah, Napoleon III's ambitions in South America turns into a day of holiday for a local village, turns into a Civil War story, turns into an American holiday for appreciating Latin America. That's brilliant, but that's history and life for you. So I want to thank our audience for sticking with us. We've had consistently about 30-something viewers throughout all of it. I want to thank you all for engaging with us. Karen for asking questions during the interview, and Dixon for engaging in a very spirited and a good conversation and debate. And I want to encourage those of you who are joining us now, most likely to see Ben's show, to please go check out this video in full after you've heard Ben talk, or at least over the weekend. And I want to thank Ben for, again, for letting us be here on his channel as we grow our name and our brand. And I want to thank everyone at PA, David Grossman in particular, Kelly, and Dr. Hyde also for all of the hard work you do, most often with a moment's notice, because some of us, I will mention no names, have a problem with long-term planning. So I want to thank all of you, and I hope that you will all have a good weekend on the other end of Ben's show. And we will be stopping the show with a video by Rod Perry, who put a video on Vimeo, a cartoon that he put over Bernie Sanders speaking. And I just love this video. I love the attitude of this video and how it encompasses the spirit of Bernie Sanders, the movement, and those of us who wants to see genuine change in politics in the United States. So thank you all, and you have a good weekend.
All right. Sorry. I just got to throw something up on screen here for us while I get that ready. And I just want to again thank everybody. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Progressive Army. Thank you, everyone. Make sure to tune in. And let me just get that going here. Sorry about that. And all right, here we go. And here's the video. Thanks again. Follow me at Progressive Green, Scandinavian Perspective. And thanks again so much. Subscribe, follow, keep doing what you're doing. You guys are great.
Don't tell me that we can't have an excellent childcare system and a great educational system in this country. Don't tell me that this great country and our young people cannot lead the world in transforming our energy system so the planet we leave to our kids and our grandchildren is one that is habitable. Don't tell me we can't do that. We can do that. It embarrasses me to tell you about what these other countries are doing for their people. They're not doing it. But in order to do that, we do need a political